Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Roy Carros for sending in some absolutely awesome pictures of his Imperium Abhuman army, I guess. I mean, there's loads of squats in here and there's some beastmen. They look absolutely fantastic. I mean, Squat Force 5, I think, is just really cool. I love the old school Yarrick model. The assassins have got all the different names. Looks really good. I think squats are just such a cool army. And I've been listening to a lot of the Gotrek and Felix audiobooks on Audible at the moment. If you haven't heard them, go and check them out. It is classic, actual good Black Library fluff. It's not 40k, it is Warhammer Fantasy, so be warned, when you go and watch it, you are going to get nostalgic for fantasy, and you're going to get really upset when you can't go and play it anymore. But really recommend you go and check those audiobooks out. These models look absolutely fantastic. Really love dwarves, whether they're dwarves in space or dwarves not in space. They just look really cool. So thank you for sending in these pictures, Roy. They look absolutely fantastic. You've made me want to go and re-listen to some of my favourite dwarf audiobooks. So great job. If anyone else has got any cool pictures that they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. So today, guys, we are going to be doing another Fixing the Rules video, and we are going to be taking a look at Wyrdvane Psykers, or Wyrdvane Psykers. I'm not quite sure how you say it. It's got a W and a Y. It's probably weird. Anyway, we'll say Wyrdvane Psykers going forward, because Psykers are weird. So for those of you that are new to this series, what I do is I take a look at units in the Guard Codex that don't quite work or that are flat out just terrible. And I say how I, as a Veteran Guard Commander, would like them to work instead. This is not a wishlisting video on, I wish that every Guardsman was armed with a las cannon or something stupid like that. This is not even necessarily a thing to wish. Oh, I wish they changed things so that this unit's really broken or whatever. No. This is a way that I would suggest you take a unit that doesn't work and you make it work in a fair, balanced, and most importantly, fun way and simple way so that it's easy for players to understand it and pick it up. So today we're going to be looking at Wyrdvane Psykers. Now, for those of you that don't know what Wyrdvane Psykers are, I don't blame you, because you probably never encountered them, ever. They are, I would argue, the worst unit in the Guard Codex, by a long way. Even Death Strikes are better than these guys. Wyrdvane Psykers truly are terrible. Yes, they did get a stratagem in the Greater Good that makes you think about them for a whole 0.2 seconds before you realise they're still bad. Yeah, they're terrible. So currently, guys, they're just an awful psychic unit. They're relatively overcosted for what they do. They've got extremely low durability. They have, despite the fact that they are described as being, in several of the stories in the Codex, described as being these guys that fling out lightning from their hands or boil enemies' brains. They have almost no psychic output whatsoever, and they can be targeted because they're not characters. So, yeah, overall, just really bad. They can't smite. They can't really buff because they get killed so easily. You do get some bonuses for taking them in bigger squads, but the bonuses really don't outweigh how terrible they are. Just, long story short, just awful. So how do we fix these guys? Well, it's quite simple, actually. What you want to do is you want to make them like Guard Zonothropes. So this idea for fixing Wyrdvane Psykers actually came to me from playing against Winter's SEO and playing against his horde of Zonothropes that was really good. Wasn't broken, but it was really good. And how Zonothropes work is they have a fairly decent stat line in the toughness 4. They've got a 3+ invulnerable save. But what they do is the more you have of them in a squad, the more powerful their smite becomes. And I think that's that you basically want to take that and apply it to the Wyrdvane Psykers. So how I would run them is I would have them as standard guardsmen. There's two ways I would run them. I'd have them with a standard guard profile, weapon skill, ballistic skill, 4+, strength, toughness 3, 1 wound each. Keep them at 1 wound each. They're only basic humans. They don't need to have multiple wounds. 1 wound each. And, basic leadership, blah, blah, blah. And they should have a 4+. The first way I'd have it is where they would have a 4+ invulnerable save. Standard. Okay? So 4+ invuln. They don't get a 3+, because 3+ invulnerable saves would be far too good to put on these guys. And how I would have it is you can take them in a squad of 3 to 9 of them, or 10, doesn't really matter, 3 to 9, and they should cost maybe 8 points each. Okay, 7 or 8 points each. That's how I would point them. And what you would have is, if you have a squad of 3 of them, they can do a smite, and it does D3 mortal wounds. That's it, standard. And when you look at that, it's like, okay, so they can't do anything else. They can just take a smite. They don't have access to any of the powers. They can just take a smite. These guys are literally just smite batteries. Okay, they're not skilled enough to do other things. They're just these battle psychers, these sanctioned psychers, whose whole point is that they just, you get enough of them together, and you sort of, with a few people with taser goes behind them, prod them forward, and they just unleash mind bullets onto the enemy. They haven't got like the mental capacity to like work together to like buff things and to do these great tactical maneuvers. But if you point them in the direction of the enemy, and then some of them are psychos, some of them are cowards, but whatever. But long story short, you push them in the direction of the enemy, and they will smite the enemy. They'll throw out some warp lightning, they'll throw out some fire, whatever. That's it. You keep them basic. So if you have 3 of them, they do a D3 smite. If you have between 4 and 6 of them, you could have it where they do 2D3 smite. And if you have 9 of them, between 7 and 10 of them, you get D3 plus 3 smite, just like Zone of Thropes. Now so you might think, oh, that's really powerful. Oh, that's ridiculous. It's like, well, no, it's not. You pay, if you want your D3 plus 3 smites, yeah, you might get 6 mortal wounds. But you're going to be paying, I would recommend 8 points per model, and I would say that's 80 points. I'd be happy to pay 90 points, and you're paying for an average of, 5 mortal wounds a turn. On a toughness 3 squad, they're quickly going to diminish in power, but even when they do diminish in power, they're still able to do a D3 smite. Do a 2D3 smite. Okay? Or my other idea was if you have it where they do a D3 smite, but if you have 3 you make them cheap, like 7 points a model, and you have them D3 plus 1, and then if you have more, D3 plus 2, and then D3 plus 3. That's one way of doing it. I don't mind. So that's how I would operate. You don't even give them access to other psychic powers. You just have these guys as cheap smite batteries, which is something that the Guard don't currently have. At the moment, most Guard Psykers, like Primaris Psykers and Astropaths, are being taken to buff units. Okay, that's what most Psykers are being taken for. Now, the second way I would do it is very similar to the first way, but I would have it where the more of them you have, not only is the better that the smite, but also is the better the invuln. But the invulnerable save degrades. So you could have it where if you have just 3 of them, then they get a 5+ invulnerable save. And if you have 4 to 6 of them, they get a 4+ invulnerable save. And if you have more of them than that, you have the max size squad, then they get a 3+ invulnerable save. Not as keen on that because then someone could, if the power like Psychic Barrier continues to exist, you could get guards like a 2 invulnerable save, which I don't think is good. You could just make it where they're not. You could make it where they're not eligible for that. I don't know. Now but that's how I would use them. I would continue. I don't know, to be honest, if I would. There is an idea, but I don't personally think I like it, even though it's kind of what Games Workshop wants us to go for. But I don't think I would have the ability where if you have Primaris Psykers near a bunch of Wyrdvane Psykers, then they can sort of buff each other. The way that Wyrdvane Psykers are often described in the fluff is they are barely stable individuals. Okay, these aren't astropaths who have been trained and who have seen the Golden Throne and who know how to use their powers. They're not astropaths are very common in the Imperium. They're not Primaris Psykers who are, the top 1% of the astropaths, the ones that have, who have really focused their mind's power, who are some of the most potent, normal, mortal human Psykers in the Imperium. They're not like that. They're not trained. Wyrdvane Psykers are not stable. They're often cracked individuals who are banded together in these degenerate, barely organised groups, and the Imperium wouldn't normally have anything to do with them, and many regiments would have nothing to do with them. But desperate times call for desperate measures, which is why, and with Psychic Awakening, more and more people becoming more psychic, but they don't know how to control their powers. That's how I would. Yeah, I don't see that those unstable individuals would provide any psychic benefit to an astropath. I think if anything, their fractured psychic screaming minds would be a distraction. So I wouldn't go so far to give a debuff to other psychics nearby, but I would definitely make it where they don't really buff each other. I don't see that. If speaking of other psykers, astropaths and Primaris Psykers don't really need much support. I mean, they're already very good units. I wouldn't really touch them if I was Games Workshop. However, units Psykers that would buff each other if you had more of them together would be astropaths, for sure. You genuinely have astropathic choirs. Everyone knows about them. That's where you get more astropaths together, you can boost the signal. That's because astropaths are trained. It makes sense for multiple astropaths to be able to come together, pool their individually not particularly powerful abilities, and to make them stronger. So I would have astropaths, if you have 2 astropaths, 3 astropaths next to each other, they can give each other +1 to cast. I think that would be great. You can have a Primaris. I think the more Primaris and astropaths that you have together, they can buff each other. I don't think Wyrdvane Psykers should do that. I think they should be cheap smite batteries that aren't overly difficult for your opponent to kill, but that aren't an overly heavy points investment for the guard player either. And it means that the astropaths, who are not really there for doing damage, can focus on buffing things. Your Primaris Psykers, who are definitely there, they can do everything. They're really, really powerful, but they're characters. So your Primaris Psykers can do a bit of smiting, they can do a bit of buffing, they can do anything. They're very skilled individuals, and they're characters. So you might say, well, why would you take a Primaris Psyker to smite the enemy? Well, you can do that because he will be safer, because your Wyrdvanes won't be able to be hidden, unlike your Primaris Psyker. And you have your Wyrdvane Psykers, who are just cheap smite batteries. So if you want to catch all, you take your Primaris. If you want a buffing one, you take your astropath. If you want a damage smite battery, you take your Wyrdvane Psykers. And that's how I would have these tiers of Psyker in the guard unit, in the guard codex, because it makes sense then. If you just want to do psychic damage, buy some Wyrdvane Psykers. Three of them put together will cost you, 24 points. I'm fine with that. If you want just a buff, cheap buffing, take an astropath. Don't worry about anything else, just take an astropath. If you want a Psyker that can do both, like a take all comers, you're going to pay through the nose for that. You're going to pay more points for it. But like you say, you're sort of getting a complete package. You pay what you get for. That's where you go for your Primaris. Makes sense. The cost of an Astropath and the Wyrdvane Psykers should be equal to the cost of a Primaris Psyker. Because that makes sense, because the advantage of the Primaris is you get it in one place. He doesn't have, you don't have to, and he can do everything. The others, yes, you do get 2 groups of units there, but obviously, those 2 units are individually weaker than the Primaris Psyker. Half of them don't have the character keyword. The other half are frail individuals at best who don't have an invulnerable save. So there you go. What do you guys think about these proposed changes to Wyrdvane Psykers? I wouldn't mind how that they were changed too much. I'm not saying they specifically need to be the way I've described them. But what I'm trying to say is we should have these tiers of Psykers, and this is how I would go about doing it. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please, as always, leave lots and lots of comments, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.